Initiated. Unidentified aerial phenomena, dreams, depression, delusions, shadow people, psychosis, sleep paralysis, and pandemics. By Matthew Roberts. The views and opinions expressed herein by the author do not represent the policies or position of the United States Department of Defense or the United States Navy, and are the sole responsibility of the author. Chapter 6. Return. On Monday, August 15th, 2018, I felt my connection turn off. What shut off was the sense of unwavering peace and incredible joy. I felt it immediately in my shoulders and upper back. Suddenly, there was tension in my shoulders. I knew it the instant it happened. I consulted Our Glorious Future for answers. In Our Glorious Future by Mabel Collins, she states that in fact this can only be felt for a short time. I noticed this was also something that was stated in the Homeric hymn to Demeter. When the goddess is interrupted from placing the boy in a fire every night by the boy's mother, Demeter states that the boy will only be immortal for a short time. At this point in my journey, I had not yet read a book titled When the Sun Moves Northward, The Way of Initiation by Mabel Collins. But I feel as I write this book that I should share a bit of its insight into what was going on here. In When the Sun Moves Northward, Mabel Collins has a diagram illustration that explains the process up to this point. I've borrowed this idea and incorporated it into the artwork on the cover of the book. To understand the artwork on the cover, you have to understand the art of Leonardo da Vinci, which I will explain later. Quote, "The sign of the neophyte, or newly planted one, the triangle, typifies the condition of sleeping and waking at the same time, and the mystic state of ecstasy which arises from this condition. Later on, the cross comes within it, that new cross of higher suffering, the suffering in and with all humanity, the cross on which the Christos of man is continually crucified, as well as the Christ himself." Unquote. That feeling of incredible unwavering peace, joy, and calm was gone. This period can last months or years, but it will end. Just as Mabel Collins wrote, "Having experienced this feeling even once gives you the knowledge on how you must lead the rest of your life, and marks the return in the hero's journey." As I sit and write this book, I do know that you can get this back if you decide to go through it again the next year, which I did do the following year. Mabel Collins also states that you can renew and expand your understanding on a yearly basis, coinciding with initiation season. And as I sit and write this book, I have found this to be the case. Let us not forget that when Persephone returns from the underworld, she is greeted by the goddess Hecate with many embraces. Hecate becomes Persephone's substitute queen. Hecate becomes Persephone's substitute queen. Persephone represents the human soul in this myth, which travels to the underworld and endures great pain. Upon its return, it is transformed. Hecate, with her many embraces, represents the newfound gifts. Hecate being the goddess of the night, moon, ghosts, and necromancy. At first, I was devastated with the fact that it had shut off. But after consulting Our Glorious Future, I understood. I knew that even though this feeling had shut off, I was still capable. I decided to pick up the book I had started and not finished, a series of lessons in Raja Yoga. There was a reason I hadn't finished the last 3 chapters, and I knew that. Everything happens for a reason. I wanted to possibly seek more answers there. To understand what I found in the last 3 chapters of this book, it's important to understand how these books were put together. This book was originally a course broken up into its chapters. In other words, individuals would apply for this class by mail with William Walker Atkinson. He would then send course materials out to the students in chapters. He later threw this course material together into a book that he published. In the lessons of this book, specifically in the last 3 chapters, he addresses some of the correspondence he had been receiving from his students. Atkinson purposefully left this in the book as a hint to the readers that this book in particular was significant. His students are informing him that they are in immense pain. Because of this, he goes off on a bit of a tangent that he didn't intend, but he felt he needed to address. Not only does he address the pain, but also informs the students what they will receive on the other side. I will share with you the statements he makes in the last 3 chapters. Quote, "To realize just what we are offering you, we would remind you of the old fairy tales of all races, in which there is to be found one or more tales telling of some poor cobbler, or tailor, or carpenter, as the case may be, who had by his good deeds gained favor with the brownies, or good fairies, who would come each night when the man and his family were asleep, and proceed to complete the work that the artisan had laid out for the morrow. The pieces of leather would be made into shoes, the cloth would be sewed into garments, the wood would be joined and nailed together into boxes, chairs, benches, and what-not. But in each case, the rough materials were prepared by the artisan himself during the day. Well, that is just what we are trying to introduce to you. A clan of mental brownies, loving and kindly disposed toward you, who are anxious and willing to help you in your work. All you have to do is give them the proper materials and tell them what you want done, and they will do the rest. But these mental brownies are a part of your own mentality, remember, and no alien and foreign entities, as some have imagined." He goes on to say, quote, "If one lives on the plane of the race thought, he is subject to its laws. For the law of cause and effect is in full operation on each plane of life. But when one raises himself above the race thought and onto the plane of the recognition of the real self, the I, then does he extricate himself from the lower laws of cause and effect, and places himself on a higher plane of causation, in which he plays a much higher part. And so, we are constantly reminding you that your tower of strength and refuge lies on the higher plane. But, nevertheless, we must deal with the things and laws of the lower plane, because very few who read these lessons are able to rest entirely upon the higher plane. The great majority of them have done no more than to lift themselves partially onto the higher plane, and they are consequently living on both planes, partly in each. The consequence being that there is a struggle between the conflicting laws of the 2 planes. The present stage is one of the hardest on the path of attainment, and resembles the birth pains of the physical body. But you are being born into a higher plane, and the pain, after becoming the most acute, will begin to cease, will begin to ease, and in the end will disappear, and then will come peace and calm. When the pain becomes the most acute, Then be cheered with the certainty that you have reached the crisis of your new spiritual birth, and that you will soon gain peace. And then you will see that the peace and bliss will be worth all the pain and struggle. Be brave, fellow followers of the path. Deliverance is nigh. Soon will come the silence that follows the storm. The path that you are experiencing, or the pain that you are experiencing, well do we know that you are experiencing the pain, is not punishment, but is a necessary part of your growth. All life follows this plan. The pains of labor and birth ever precede the deliverance. Such is life, and life is based upon truth, and all is well with the world. We did not intend to speak of these things in this lesson, but as we write, there comes to us a great cry for help and a word of encouragement and hope from the class, which is taking this course of lessons, and we feel bound to respond as we have done. Peace be with you, one and all. Unquote. The above statement from Atkinson was profound in pure truth. It speaks to why this transformation is so difficult to describe. Transformation mimics life, possessing all of its parts: pain, birth, death, and rebirth. Ancient cultures knew this and incorporated it into myth. It is the hero's journey. For me, it was real confirmation of what I had just been through. Atkinson and Collins wrote this series of books over 100 years ago that spoke directly to the experiences I was having. I wanted to know more about it so I could help people. After reading this, I had a dream in which there was a man that I had a lengthy and detailed conversation with. He had a short salt and pepper beard with more salt than pepper. He was stocky with a white glow to him. Because of the glow, I had at the time mistaken him for one of the light beings from the temple. He spoke with me at some length about the human subconscious and human psychology. He stated that people can know something subconsciously without knowing it consciously. He said that when people know something subconsciously, it will leave a conscious impression on their waking lives. He stated that the link between the two, pulling things from the subconscious into the conscious memory, can be accomplished through meditation and dreaming. He stated that the time in which most people do this is in the waking state from sleep. He stated that it would be important to keep a dream journal close to the bed, as these moments of memory in the waking stages can be fleeting. They are the seconds where one is becoming conscious after sleep. He stated that pulling from the subconscious into the conscious memory is the goal. He further explains that not only do you have a subconscious, but that humans also have a collective subconscious. This means that as a race, we all have some vague idea of the things that speak to our subconscious. He used the example of this experience I'd been having. How was I able to see the message of this new consciousness transformation everywhere? In art, music, books, theater, science. He explained that the reason I could see this is because these ideas are popular. They are popular because they speak to our collective subconscious. And all our conscious self knows is that we love this message, but consciously we don't understand why. We are left with only a conscious impression. He explained that subconsciously we all know we must go through this change. And this is the reason we love works that speak to this message. This conversation was quite extensive. I asked questions and he answered them. He seemed to be wearing a metal band around his head with what looked like chainmail running over the top and down the back of his head, like he was a knight or something. And this struck me as odd. I woke that morning with the name Robert Moore running through my head over and over. So I wrote down the things that this man had said to me along with the name Robert Moore. My intent was that I would start to look into these things after work. I was amazed about hearing this voice while waking from sleep. Mabel Collins wrote about how she would also hear this, and it's how she wrote Light on the Path. In When the Sun Moves Northward, she writes the following, quote, I was in the state of consciousness known to the occultist of southern India as Jagrat of Swapna, which is the consciousness of waking clairvoyance. Only a person ignorant of occultism could suppose that it was in any way possible to bring this knowledge to earth, except by the work of a disciple who had attained to this consciousness. In no state of unconsciousness of the scribe, by no overshadowing or control of the master, can teaching of this absolute character be obtained. I committed to memory in that state the first lines of the ancient mystic writing now known to all students of occultism under the title of Light on the Path. I brought it down into physical consciousness and recorded it. I obeyed the order given to me, and again, entering into a state of waking clairvoyance, returned to the chapel of light, bringing back the rules one by one and writing them down until I had obtained the whole. Unquote. When I got home, I looked up the name Robert Moore. Maybe he wrote some books, I thought. I found a book by Dr. Robert L. Moore that seemed to fit. It's called The Magician and the Analyst, the Archetype of the Magus in Occult Spirituality. Dr. Robert Moore was a professor of psychoanalysis, culture, and spirituality in Chicago. He was also a Jungian psychoanalyst. Jungian psychology is named after its founder, Dr. Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist that analyzed psychiatry through a prism that also involved anthropology, archaeology, philosophy, literature, and religious studies. Jung is considered the father of modern-day psychoanalysis. I was surprised to learn that not only had Carl Jung influenced Robert Moore, but that he had also influenced the writings of Joseph Campbell. In Moore's book, The Magician and the Analyst, he states that he had many years earlier decided that he was going to look into why it was that so many young people were drawn to occult spirituality. He touched on initiation and how that relates to occult spirituality, which led me to another one of his books called The Archetype of Initiation, Sacred Space, Ritual Process, and Personal Transformation. It was in reading this book that I began to understand the totality of my experiences. As odd as it may seem, everything I had been through which resulted in this higher consciousness was in fact an initiation process. This was my big aha moment. Up until this point, I hadn't understood that. The Kybalion was written by the 3 initiates. Now I got it. And I was supposed to know this as well, otherwise I wouldn't have been reading that book. One night I was reading The Archetype of Initiation, and I got up to go to the restroom. I laid the book on my nightstand. When I came back, I went to grab the book and noticed on the back cover was a picture of Dr. Robert Moore. He was a stocky-looking man with a salt and pepper beard. This was the man I had seen in my dream. He was the one that taught me about human consciousness and psychology. I grabbed my laptop and did some research into him specifically. He died in June 18th, 2016. This is how he was able to communicate with me in my dreams. Robert Moore writes the following concerning transformation or initiation. Quote, all discussions of the archetype of initiation start with the assumption that life is a series of transformations. As we Jungians use the word transformation, it could be translated initiation. In everyday life, the word initiation usually makes us think of the initiation into fraternities and sororities and things like that. But initiation really refers to something that is part and parcel of the universal spiritual journey, the pilgrimage of human life. Initiation is the process of dying and being reborn. This archetype is so powerful in human life that it turns up in all parts of human experience. And once you have the eyes to see it, a lot of the things that you have wondered about will begin to fall into place. I understood what he meant by having the eyes to see it. I see it everywhere. For me, the most important lesson from the archetype of initiation was the process. Moore describes the symptoms of the onset of this process as not only consisting of depression, but also of things like synchronicities, acting out, sexual promiscuity, the midlife crisis, and so on. Carl Jung also talks about synchronicities. As an example of this, in my case, was the days of coincidences I had when I drove to Patuxent River. The cultivation of attention in one's life will help them to recognize these synchronicities. Moore writes, maybe you are a young maiden and you are sitting by this nice little pond, and all of a sudden this little ball rolls by, and it rolls down a hole. You go over there and look, and all of a sudden you find this passageway. Then the question becomes, will I or won't I go on and try to figure out what this is and what it means? Campbell designates this kind of experience as the call. It is a radical experience because the call is always a call to transformation. And contrary to the commonly held romantic fantasies, it is always scary if it is real transformation. Jungians talk a lot about the idea of synchronicity. Isn't it interesting, Jungians always say, how just about the time you thought there wasn't any hope, suddenly you run into this particular book. For example, Morton Kelsey or John Sanford or Carl Jung, or you meet someone personally. Of course, these things just happen and can easily be considered accidents, but they tell you something you need to know at that time. Helpers appear along the way, but they cannot do the work. They just provide assistance, a little guidance. An elixir of life is usually gained, however, because there is something precious to be found here in this space. Mythology is just replete with this, and the New Testament is full of this. The pearl of great price is out here, or something like it, and you discover this treasure. If you're lucky and get the right help, and have the right amount of courage, then you try to return to the world outside the labyrinth, outside the cave, with the treasure. Unquote. In Archetype of Initiation, Moore describes the onset of transformation. Many people, when they reach a certain point in life, have done everything society tells them they need to do in order to be happy. They have the job, the cars, the house, and the kids. But often they find that something is lacking. After attaining these things, toiling day and night to fill the void within them, they step back to admire what they have accomplished for themselves. As they step back, the delight turns quickly into horror as they realize the void within them that they have set out to fill 20 years ago and haven't had much time to think about since, has grown more empty and cavernous. Now a cave complex running deep through the soul, It's so powerful that it threatens to undo the hard work of the past 20 years. Now it calls your name and beckons you to enter. Most will flee. They grasp at any distraction that comes along. A sports car, a new job, a bigger house, extramarital affairs, alcohol, drugs, trouble with the law, anything that will drown out the calls of the inner demons in the cavern. Moore describes these distractions as a searching behavior. The person is seeking the ritual elder that can show them how to turn this situation around and constitute wholeness within the psyche. In essence, the person is looking for someone or something, but they don't consciously know what or who that is, nor do they know why or what they are supposed to do. This is where Moore points out that in today's society there is a serious lack of these ritual elders. I have to inject here that the reason most people don't know about this transformation is that there is a simple concept that most people have not adopted. Forgiveness. It's such a simple word when spoken, but it is quite another thing to adopt this as a philosophy. It is what separates the common man from the divine. Just as Mabel Collins states, the surrender must be absolute. It must cover not only a single instance of wrongdoing or injustice, but all instances of injustice and wrongdoing. Ritual elders should be known to everyone and available for easy access. The church and organized religion have always provided this in the past, but they no longer do. As it stands today, when someone starts to exhibit the symptoms, they are simply given a prescription for antidepressants, told that their emotions are not their own fault but merely a simple chemical imbalance in the brain, and sent on their way. This will almost always result in a failed initiation. They will begin to have experiences but never have any kind of leadership towards the correct knowledge, which could explain their vivid dreams or even the beings they see. It's tragic. Sometimes it appears that this person has just gone crazy. I believe the chemical imbalance in the brain is the cause of depression, but that imbalance is caused by your own negative thoughts, your inability or unwillingness to control the mind. The mind, just like anything else to do with the human body, must be manicured and looked after. It must be kept clean. I found it interesting that Robert Moore writes about how one needs to cook for the appropriate amount of time. An experienced ritual elder would know when you're done, or if you need to remain in the oven a bit longer. I believe this was the reason the small man appeared in my room and told me, "Don't give up, keep going." He knew I wasn't finished cooking yet. During my return, I had a small glimpse of the technology, and it's mind-blowing. I also believe that they only permit us to see what they want us to see. The technology we see is not for them. I don't believe they need it. It's for us. I think the stuff we see is possibly ancient technology to them. It's just beyond our understanding. We see this tech that is just beyond us, and we begin to wonder how we can create such a device. As an example of this, I awoke in bed one night because I felt something placed on the back of my neck. Once again, I had the familiar, heavy feeling. What's going on? I calmly thought. Instantly, I could see what was happening from the perspective of the person standing over me. I could see a device that had been placed over me that ran the entire length of my body. I could hear what sounded like a whale song with higher and lower pitches. The device was a large screen that was lit in shades of blue light, and I could see everything inside my body in real time. I watched as I could see my heart pumping blood through individual veins. The device was zooming in and out on various organs in my body. The whale song makes me think it was sonic technology that would send these sounds out, and the return would be interpreted as a real-time image in this device. I could see there was a floating metal sphere in my room. It was drifting around like a balloon and had some kind of a dull red laser on it that happened to be searching my room. It was looking around the room as though it were attached to an eyeball. The laser would change in intensity and in form as it was examining the room and scanning various objects. I felt the device removed from my neck as the sphere's light shut off and it left my field of vision. I felt two arms wrap around my chest under my arms. I heard a voice say, "Hold on, close your eyes." I didn't close them because everything happened so quickly. I immediately heard a loud bang, and I was inside a tunnel of white light that was growing in intensity. It was disorienting, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was not at home in bed. I was somewhere else. I opened my eyes, and I was lying in the most comfortable bed I've ever been in. I looked down, and there was a blanket over me made out of something I've never seen before. It was copper in color and seemed to be made out of loosely woven fabric with glitter or lights woven into it. It looked like it should feel coarse to the touch, but it was incredibly soft. The bed I was laying in was made out of the same material. The lighting in the room was dim, and the wall I was facing also had a copper tinge to it. The wall looked like it was made of 2-foot-high metal bands, with bands of 2-inch black material sandwiched between them. I was facing this wall and felt the urge to get up and look around, but a hand quickly passed by my peripheral vision and came to rest on the top of my forehead and the voice said, "Rest." I was falling back asleep as I felt this being kiss me on the forehead like a mother caring for a sick child. I awoke again later and was no longer facing the wall. The room was large, and there was another bed on the other side of the room, but it was empty. I didn't see anyone around. The banding I had seen earlier wrapped around the walls throughout the room and extended up to the domed ceiling. The banding on the walls seemed to continue into the corridors on either side of the room. The floor was black and highly polished like onyx or glass. In between the beds, there was a protrusion extending from the wall that was a bit taller than me. It had a silver metal dome with a brushed finish on top of it that looked like a lampshade. The whole thing looked like a giant, sleek lamp, but it wasn't emitting any light. I expected the floor to be cold when I put my feet down on it, but it was the same temperature as the rest of the room. I was not afraid. I felt very welcome and at home there. I remember turning toward one of the doors to the room, but that was the last thing I remember. I'm not sure what they did to me while I was there. But the day before, I know I wasn't feeling well. I had a mild headache and felt off. I feel like I was in this place for several days, as I remember waking up several times and vaguely remember being given something to eat. But I awoke in my bed the next morning somehow.